Hello, welcome to Garden Air. Today I'm going to give you a rose tour with full names and descriptions. I'm going to start off with this beautiful rose here, which is called Dick Clark. It is a Grandiflora rose and just an absolutely wonderful performer. This will get really tall throughout the season. It'll just keep growing after this flush of blooms, and it usually gets a good 6 feet high. Nice glossy leaves. Very disease resistant and insect resistant. It's a really hardy rose that just performs wonderfully for me. This rose has actually survived like 4 different moves. So this rose has started in New York, it's gone to Pennsylvania with us, and now it's here in Illinois. And it's just done fabulously through every move. So can't be happier with this awesome rose. So again, this is Dick Clark. This little rose, you can see how tiny the blooms are. This is actually a red drift rose, or also called a carpet rose. And its legs just get so long that I did end up giving it a trellis to help kind of support it somewhat, and to try to keep some shape. Otherwise it would go all over my walkway and all through the garden. So the trellis I found really helped with this guy, because it is such a huge growing rose and just spreads legs all over the place, but it's almost constantly in bloom like this. And throughout the summer, this is just a beautiful rose with the tiniest delicate little flowers. This little rose bush, I actually don't have an ID on it, but I know it's a Grandiflora rose. I started it in the back garden and it wasn't performing very well. Actually, it wasn't blooming at all. So I brought it out here to the front garden, and it has done a complete turnaround. It's blooming, it's growing beautifully. I do have some brown edges from all the rain we got early in the spring. So a few of my roses, you'll see brown buds and brown edges this year. And I'm hoping by the next flush I won't have that as much, because the rainfall has slowed down. We just got so much rain in April, May, and the start of June that it did affect my rose blooms a little bit this year, but that's okay. It's better than not having any rain. So this is a Grandiflora No ID. This beautiful rose is called Sentimental. And I just put this in like 2 years ago. It's just starting to get some size. And this is a Floribunda. One of those beautiful splashy roses, and I just love it. It does have some nice fragrance. Some of the blooms are really tiny, and then some of them are a little bit larger. It's not completely consistent throughout the whole bush, but it is starting to be a nice bloomer now that it's getting some maturity. I will get this one at a later date. This is Jude the Obscure, and it's actually just finishing some blooming right now, so it's not looking at its best. I'll wait for the next flush. This gorgeous rose is Lady of Shalott, and I actually have 2 next to each other because I just loved her color so much. Some years she's a deeper orange than this, and then other years she gets this more palish peachy color, and I think it just depends on how intense the heat of the sun is for the year. Very bushy English rose. This rose is from David Austin, and she's a very big, bushy English rose. You can develop it into a climber because the stems will get so long. This bush actually got taller than me last year, and I'm 5'9". This rose probably went about 6.5 feet last year. So it is a nice size rose and a really nice performer. The leaves are a little bit more delicate on Lady of Shalott. They're a little bit smaller, not a very deep green, kind of a velvety green. It's a very delicate, feminine, pretty rose, and her name is just perfect, I think. This is another one that just finished a bigger flush of blooming, so it's starting to get some new buds put out now. This is Desdemona, also by David Austin, and it's off-white to white in color. Sometimes you'll get some peachy pinks in there, and again, I think this one really is determined by the heat of the sun as to what color you're actually going to get throughout the year. But it should be an off-white to white rose. Beautiful fragrance on it. It's a little on the softer side, kind of a powdery, pretty little fragrance. This is Abraham Darby, and for some reason it did not. Last year this bush was huge, and it was just a beautiful year last year in 2021 for roses. This year my roses did not get as large, but they are blooming nicely, and we had that water damage from all the rain in this early spring. So I am again hoping for that next flush to be without all these brown edges. But Abraham Darby is one of David Austin's more older versions, older hybrids. It's been around for a long time. It's like one of their classics. Absolutely gorgeous fragrance on Abraham Darby. He's a beautiful performer. Nice shiny bright leaves that are really nice in size, a darker green, very disease resistant I find, and it's just a wonderful performer as well. This beautiful rose is Earth Angel, and she is bred by Cordis, I believe, and just a beautiful cup-shaped little rose that is usually very white for me, but some people find them to be a little bit more pink. I think later on in the season I'll get more of a pink bloom from this one. This is another one I started in the back garden, and it did not perform well for me out here, so I moved it out here, and now she's performing much nicer and doing beautifully. So I'll get some more size on this one, and she should put out another flush of second blooms that will just be gorgeous. This is the Ancient Mariner, and I'm a little disappointed with this one this year, only because it was so fabulous last year. Last year it was huge and gorgeous and absolutely covered in blooms, and this year it was really affected by that rainfall, I think, more than all the other ones were. So my buds suffered a little bit from brown spots, and the blooms don't want to open quite as well as normal. So I'm again hoping for that second bloom from this one to be a little bit more impressive with a little bit of growth put onto the bush. And I'm not sure why the roses stayed a little smaller this year, but it must have been something to do with our winter. So this is Ancient Mariner. This one is also a David Austin rose. Absolutely beautiful, wonderfully fragrant, and it is very disease resistant. I never have a problem with this rose at all. Nothing really even eats it. It's just a great performer and beautiful scent, very prolific on blooms. It blooms with really no issues at all. You can see all the buds coming along. Coming around the weeping cherry, we have Munstead Wood. Dark burgundy blooms and just a gorgeous scent on this rose. Munstead is just awesome. I can't say enough good things about Munstead Wood. Beautiful color, amazing intoxicating fragrance, and so hardy and disease resistant. If you like deep colored roses with a lot of fragrance, get a Munstead Wood. You will not be disappointed. I mentioned this in another video. The only thing you have to watch for on this guy is its thorns. It's very thorny, but I really don't have a problem with it. Absolutely amazing rose. This is another one that's already put out its pretty flush of blooms, and I wish I videoed it like maybe a week ago. This is Poet's Wife, and this is a gorgeous scented rose. It is such a feminine, soft, pretty scent, and gorgeous, fluffy yellow blooms. And this again is a David Austin rose, one of their varieties that are really noted for beautiful fragrance, and it does not disappoint if you like fragrant roses. Also a good performer, just absolutely beautiful if you love yellow roses. It's a nice shrub style, bush style rose. It doesn't climb, it stays a nice, this one's actually staying a nice smaller shape for me. If you have a really large poet's wife, let me know in the comments how large it gets for you, because I've debated having to move this one, but so far it's staying happy in this little spot I have it in. So let me know if you have one that gets to a monstrous size. This is a yellow knockout, and the yellow knockout is the only knockout rose that has fragrance. And the fragrance doesn't really even come from the flowers. It comes from the petioles of the leaves. So it's fragrant even when it's not in bloom, which I really love, because when this is coming in the spring and the leaves are just forming, I can smell the rose already. And that's what I love about it. The downside of that is, because it's so fragrant, it is a Japanese beetle magnet. So I have to fight Japanese beetles on this like crazy when they come in. They are not here yet for the season, but I'm expecting them anytime now. And this rose will definitely be their target like every other year. So if you struggle with Japanese beetles, you might not want to put in a yellow knockout. If you can handle the beetles, it is a beautiful knockout rose that performs beautifully. This flush is almost done, as you can tell. There's a lot of these are dying back and dropping petals now, but the blooms get absolutely bright yellow. You can see more like on this spot here, and it's just a gorgeous performer. It is always in bloom throughout the entire summer. This is a climber that's not blooming at the moment. It's just starting to bud out. This is a Shropshire Lad, also from David Austin, so I will get it at another time when it's blooming. And this is an old-fashioned Damask Rose. Just finished a flush, so I don't have much to show you on blooms. It's more of an older version rose, like an old world rose. The fragrance is intoxicating, strong, gorgeous fragrance, which is what I love about these. Shiny, grooved petal or leaves that this really just performs well. It's been very disease resistant for me. As you can see, the leaves are nice and green. Nothing really bothers this rose. It just does its thing. Sometimes you'll see these labeled as concrete roses or landscape roses because they are just so hardy, very old-fashioned, just a great old world rose. And I think every rose collector really should just have one of these. This rose is really appreciated from a distance because the blooms are just poof, 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 poof. They're just amazing. And this is another drift rose. This is a big, beautiful white drift, or also known as a ground cover rose for obvious reasons. It does start to get some height later in the season, but it does stay low to the ground and just kind of sprawls. Really no fragrance. It's just all beauty. This little beauty is called Joseph's Coat, and it was here when I bought the house and just kind of tucked in a spot where it wasn't, well, it was getting too much sun and it was just frying there and it was just not performing. It was almost dead and really just put out a few blooms here or there. I've moved it. It's not the most disease resistant variety. It is kind of an older style climber. So you'll see it gets black spot kind of easily that I have to get in and remove at the bottom of the bush. So airflow is very important for these, and I treat with copper to try to keep the black spot at bay. So if you really only plant disease resistant, Joseph's Coat might not be for you. I probably wouldn't even have it if it wasn't already here at the house when we moved in, but the colors on it are just so beautiful. I really just can't get myself to part with it, even though I really try to strictly stay with disease resistant varieties. This is another Shropshire Lad, actually right next to it, that I just got and waiting for it to grow in. I just put it in bare root this year, so waiting for that to get a little height and see if I can also attach it to this trellis. This beautiful rose is Scepter'd Isle, and it's amazing. She's just finishing a flush now, so there's a lot of deadheading to do on her, but even while she's finishing this flush here, she's starting new flushes up near the top. And this rose is almost always in bloom, and very beautiful fragrance, nice yellow center. She is a great performer, and I'm really thinking about getting a second one for the bed out front, just so I can have some of this gorgeous bubblegum pink out there, because I love this color on a rose. The scent is beautiful. As I'm going through this garden, I'm seeing how many of my roses need to be deadheaded back here. So I'm definitely going to need to go through, get some deadheading done, and get ready for my second flush. This is another tiny little Munstead rose, Munstead Wood rose. This one they sent me in very bad condition, and they replaced it with the other larger one that I showed you earlier. But it's starting to fill in, it's coming back, and it's surviving. So now I have two. Oh, look, we have a little bee. So this is Gertrude Jeckyll. If you like fragrance and a beautiful performing rose, get yourself a Gertrude Jeckyll. You will not be disappointed. That is all I can say about this rose. It is one of my favorites for fragrance. I mean, look at the bees. They just are drawn to this rose because the fragrance is amazing. The color is amazing. And she has just bloomed like crazy. So I have all this deadheading to do. And she'll just come right back again and just pop, 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 pop all over again with blooms and be beautiful all over again. The one next to it is Britten. Oh, by the way, this is a David Austin rose, and so was Scepter'd Isle. So this is Britten, also from David Austin. And Benjamin, I think, is an overlooked rose. Not sure why, because it is a really nice red rose. It's not true red. It's, I don't know how to explain the color, because it has a little bit of an orangey tint to it, but it stands out when it's in bloom. You can, you know, the blooms really stand out against all that green. It's a beautiful cup-shaped rose. The fragrance is not intense by any means. It's not one that I would recommend for a highly fragrant rose, but I would recommend it as a beautiful performer. Disease resistant, hardy, comes back beautiful for me every year. Very beautiful performer. I can't say anything bad about this rose. I just wish it was fragrant. Next, we're coming up to Tess of the D'Urberville, another David Austin rose, and one of my favorites, I think, only because she gets so huge. And she has fluffy, frilly roses. She's very different from all the other roses. She's very frilly, not really a formal looking rose, more of a casual, relaxed, beautiful rose. She kind of sprawls. You can put her up as a climber. You can just give her a lot of space because she really gets leggy and long and gorgeous, and she'll just continue to bloom throughout the season as well. Fragrance is slight. She's really all looks, and she is another one, however, with massive thorns. This is the rose that I fear pruning, actually, every spring. This is the rose that just, yeah, the thorns are incredible on Tess. So if you have a hard time with thorns, Tess of the D'Urberville is not one for you. But if you can handle the thorns in an absolutely beautiful rose that needs space, then get yourself a Tess of the D'Urberville, because she's awesome. All my roses are awesome. I can't say anything bad about a rose bush. I love them all, but yeah. There it is. Another rose that I do not know the name of. It was just something I grabbed that was in a bag, and yeah, they're named, but I just didn't I didn't write it down, or I didn't remember it. This is a little Floribunda, and it really wasn't doing well for me for the first couple of years, so I'm actually happy to see all these blooms on it. It's little because it really has just been struggling since I put it in, but it looks like it has finally achieved some success. So I'm anxious to see this one grow a little bit. I just wish I knew its name. Very fluffy looking petals on the blooms. They're not extremely large, and it's not all that fragrant, but she is very pretty. And she's sitting here next to my Tess. Next to it is a tea rose. I knew the name of this one, but I think I'm forgetting it. It's not really quite in bloom yet. If I can remember the name, I will put it up on the screen. Tea roses can be a little bit more difficult. They can be needy. Again, we have some browning on the petals from all the rain we got earlier in the season. It's just, it happens. It happens to all of us rose growers. So if you have those brown tips because of all the, because you've had a lot of rain, don't beat yourself up. It happens to all of us. It's normal. Also, don't water your roses from the top. Like, don't spray water all over the tops. Try to water only at the bottom, and you can reduce a lot of that brown edging. Can't really do much about it when it's coming from rain, though. Just look at this beauty behind me. This is Bishop's Castle, and she's in the middle of finishing a lower flush and starting an upper flush. So you can see some of the fading blooms down here and more buds up here, and she is just loaded this year. I am so happy with this rose. Bishop's Castle. She spreads and gets nice good size, doesn't get overly tall, just wide. Her petals are gorgeous pink and very fragrant. This is one of my favorite roses to make rose water from, or rose oils, or anything like that, just because it keeps its fragrance so nicely. So this is a gorgeous rose all the way around. The thorns are not that bad on it. And this is another one from David Austin. So Bishop's Castle, I think it's another one that's often overlooked and not talked about so much in the David Austin groups, but I don't understand why. Maybe people just aren't buying it, not knowing what a gem it is, but it's a wonderful rose. And right next to it, I have the Alnwick Rose. And yeah, this one has, it's not impressive looking right now. I think the heat is starting to get, it's been 101 degrees for 3 days straight. And I think all of my roses are showing it. It never gets that hot here. But this is the Alnwick Rose, another beautiful pink rose that gets a nice cup shape to it. And the fragrance on this is like feminine, powdery, and quite different from that of other roses, which is what I like about this one so much, is because it's very unique in the fragrance department. Over there is another yellow knockout. Since we already talked about that, I'm not going to really show that one. It's a smaller one that I just put in last year. And this is Calypso, put out by Easy Elegance Roses. This is another Easy Care landscape rose, and it has a nice soft pink. Just a beautiful, easy rose, not a lot of fragrance. It's really just meant to be pretty in your landscape. I just had to get one because I really liked its color, and I think she is really pretty behind, or sitting in front of my white drift. Last but not least, we're going to just show off these beautiful superhero. Again, these are from Easy Elegance. And again, really just meant to be a beautiful landscape rose. No fragrance on these, but they're easy. They're disease resistant. They don't require a lot of care. I recommend pruning all your roses, even if they are low care or they say you don't have to. All roses benefit from good pruning. So prune your roses every year, despite what they say, and you'll have better blooms each year. So this one's also finishing up its first flush and going into a second. And I'll probably be feeding all these guys again relatively soon. I will put a link below to my rose feeding video where I show you how to make the fertilizer that I use on my roses in the spring. And also there's another rose tour video on my channel. So if you love roses, you are on the right channel, because I love talking roses and showing them off. So it's what I mainly do, and always happy to answer your questions. So if you have any rose questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. And I thank you so much for watching. Please hit subscribe and like, and I will see you next video. Thanks guys. Bye.